So, super happy to be here today. What I want to talk about today is positioning. That's kind of my jam. That is my thing that I speak about. But specifically, what I want to talk about today is positioning and how it relates to competition and how we can use strategic positioning to beat the competition, even when the competition is bigger than us and seemingly more powerful than us. So think about it this way. Our products don't exist in a vacuum. They exist within a context of competitors. And we have a lot of competitors. What's interesting though is we have different kinds of competitors at different points in the buyer journey. And so I want to talk about how this shifts. At the beginning, we've got customers that are trying to figure out how to narrow down a short list. Like, what should I pay attention to? And at that stage, we've got competitors that look like the hordes. So we have this problem of how do we stand out from the 9 million other competitors that look just like us? And then as we narrow down the list, we got to pick a winner. And at that stage, we generally have this kind of at least one big competitor floating around. And sometimes they don't even directly compete with us. It's like, it's like I could kind of make do with my accounting software or something like that. And so we've got this big one, which I call the giant. So at some point there, we're going to have to kill the giant. And then lastly, we need people to actually make the decision and switch. And interestingly, we end up with another competitor there, which is the ghost or status quo. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these. By the way, as I go into this, you'll see across the top, like where you see chat, there's a tab there called Q&A. You guys can click on Q&A and you can put the questions in there. I'm going to run through this and then we're going to have a break at the end for Q&A. So that's how it's going to work. So let's talk about how we compete against the hordes. The hordes are like everybody else in the space. Now, sometimes I talk to people and they say, you know what, my space is not that crowded. I don't think I have this problem. And I'm a little skeptical of that because I think most spaces are pretty crowded. At least they are from a customer's point of view. So this chart gets shown a lot at marketing conferences. This is the marketing technology landscape. A guy puts this together every year. So like, think of all the software and all the land. This is just the marketing stuff. There's 7,000 companies on that chart. Sales tech isn't any different. It looks like this. Here's data and AI. This looks bad too. Once I was at a conference and a guy came up to me and he said, no, April, I'm in this really specialized area. And what we do is drone technology. And we don't actually have this problem of lots and lots of competitors. And I'm like, oh, I bet you I could find one of these. And then I did. There it is, the drone technology market. That's 2018. I bet you it's worse now. So how do I stand out from all these other folks? Like, how do I make it plain to customers how I'm different, what I'm good for, and whether or not they should look at me? So the first way we can do this is we make sure that we're only fighting a fight we can win. So that might sound obvious, but in general, I feel like quite often, this is particularly true of startups, we are often trying to beat Bobby Fischer at chess, if you know what I mean. Like, we are running up straight against an unbeatable competitor and positioning ourselves kind of unconsciously or unintentionally in such a way that we're never, ever going to win the way we're positioned. So I'm going to give you two examples of this. And the first one is really stupid, but I'm hoping it illustrates the point. And then I'm going to give you a more serious technology one. Okay, so bear with me on my stupid example. So let's say we're not in tech. What we are is we're cake makers. We're bakers. And I'm a baker. My specialty is chocolate cake. And I wake up one morning and I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to innovate the heck out of chocolate cake because that's my jam. And I come up with this idea. What if we had chocolate cake that was like a snack and we could like make it sort of portable so that I could drink coffee in one hand and eat the chocolate cake in the other hand? And I come up with this thing here on the right-hand side. It's amazing. People love it. I've got all my test customers are like all crazy for it. And they're like, here's my innovative cake thing. It's amazing. So I'm going to launch it. And specifically, I get this idea. I'm going to call up the gal at Starbucks that buys snack things, and I'm going to convince her that we're going to, Starbucks across the land should carry my amazing innovative cake thing. So I call up the gal from Starbucks, and here's how I pitch it to her. I'm like, hey, Starbucks lady, uh, I got this thing. It's amazing. It's cake innovation. What it is it's not actually the cake. I actually took a piece of cake and then I made it kind of small, kind of like a morsel of cake. And then I decided I want to make it portable. So I gave it sort of a handle. It's not really a handle, it's more like a stick. And so I've got this amazing, innovative cake on a stick thing. It's fantastic. All my users love it. It's so great. You should buy some of it. And the gal at Starbucks is like, no, 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 that's cake doing things cake wasn't meant to do. Like that's Franken cake is what you got there. I don't want that. And why does she think that? Because you set it up like a cake contest. You right out of the boat, you said it's cake. What wins a cake contest? The cake is cake in town. Like, and what do we want in cake? We want big piece of cake. We don't want a little piece of cake. We want a big piece of cake. And you know what we really want? We want frosting, man. And I want tons of it. And that thing doesn't have frosting. And look at your product. What's special and different and innovative about your product? It's the ball and the stick and a whole bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with cake. So you set yourself up in a cake contest. You cannot win a cake contest with that thing. That thing does not win a cake contest. It is not cakier than cake. Cake wins a cake contest, you lose. We could have positioned this in a different way. We could have said, hey, Starbucks lady, you know what I was thinking about? I was thinking about lollipops. But and I thought, you know what would be cool? A lollipop for a grown-up that they could eat with their coffee. So like we made it out of cake. Totally different. Totally different. Of course, it's got a ball. Of course, it's got a stick. All the stuff that's special and cool about my product makes sense. It belongs there. And if we're talking about a lollipop contest where, this is not lollipops for everybody, this is a lollipop for grown-ups at the coffee shop. Cake Pop wins that contest. So your best market category takes your product's strengths and it puts it right in the middle of what you say you are. So let me give you a not stupid example of this. So this is a company I know from here in Canada, and they're called Clearpath Robotics. Started by two guys, mechatronics engineering degrees. They're robot guys. They're making robots. So eventually they came up with this idea for this robot that you see on the right-hand side of this chart. And what it is, the robot drives around and it delivers stuff from one place to another inside a manufacturing plant. That's what it does. Now, you might not think that sounds too complicated, but this thing is super complicated. It's full of mapping and sensors and artificial intelligence, and it's a miracle of modern technology. These guys go out to pitch this thing, though, and they get into the manufacturing plant, and they're like, hey, we're Clearpath Robotics, and we're here today to sell you some robots. And the buyers of robots sitting across go, yeah, robots. You know what, man? We got robots. We've been buying robots for decades. You know what we got? We got approved robot vendors. You're not one of them. We know what robots cost. You guys seem really expensive for robots. And the Clearpath is left going, wait, no. We're special robots, like different robots like the world has never seen before. So eventually they get this idea, maybe positioning this thing as a robot isn't actually doing us any favors, because people are confusing us with a thing that picks up a roll of tape and puts it in a cardboard box. So they take a step backwards and they're like, what's special about us? What's so cool about us? What's our big differentiating things? First thing is mobility. It drives around. Then it's mapping, sensors, artificial intelligence. What has mobility, mapping, sensors, and artificial intelligence? How should we position this thing? And eventually they get this idea, maybe what we've invented here is a self-driving car, or as they position it, autonomous vehicles for industrial uses. So they reposition this thing as a self-driving car. Of course it drives around. Of course it's got mapping sensors and artificial intelligence. Of course it's nothing like a thing that picks up a roll of tape and puts it in a box. I don't expect that. I don't expect it to be priced like that either. What I really love about this as a positioning example is if you look at the product itself, you can see where that shift in positioning actually went all the way down to the industrial design of the product. So you can see that the robot itself has white headlights on the front and red brake lights at the back. That's strictly, they actually do nothing. That is strictly there to drive home this positioning of this thing as an autonomous vehicle. So how do we find? So we're trying to beat the hordes. We know positioning is important. How do we actually find our best market position? Now, positioning is a tragically misunderstood thing. So I'm going to start with a definition. Positioning defines how your product is the best in the world at delivering something, some value that a well-defined set of customers cares a lot about. That's a mouthful of a definition. And the reason it is because positioning is actually composed of 5 component pieces. We can think of it this way. Positioning defines, first of all, who's the competitive alternative to us? So if we didn't exist, what would folks do? Secondly, what are the unique attributes or features of our product? Next, what is the value we can deliver for customers? And then the next piece is what customers. So what is our segmentation? What's the definition of our best fit customers? And then lastly, market category. Are we a robot or a self-driving car? Interestingly, when you look at these things, all of them have a relationship to each other. Like if I say, let's take anything on this wheel here, value, the unique value that my product delivers to customers is completely dependent on the unique features of it. But the unique features are only unique when I compare them to a competitive alternative. So those things are all related. Customer segmentation, my best fit customers, by definition, these are the folks that really, really care a lot about my value. And then market category is a little less intuitive, but if you think about it, the best market category for us to position in is the market category that helps make this value obvious to these target customers. So all these things relate to each other. So how do we actually figure it out? Where's the starting point? I spent a lot of time thinking about this. In fact, years. and and what I eventually got to was we actually have to start with competitive alternatives. Otherwise, if we start anywhere else, we'll come up with neat positioning, but it doesn't actually necessarily work out in the market because it doesn't position us relative to the alternative ways that people could solve the problem. When most people mess this up, they mess up the first step, which is every day I get some little startup come to me and they'll say, you know what, we position around ease of use. That's our big thing. Like we're way easier to use. And here's our competitors. There are a whole bunch of little companies nobody ever heard of. And with them, it takes 15 clicks to do a thing. And with us, it only takes 2. So ease of use is our thing. But then I get working with them and I'm like, but wait a second. Do you actually lose any deals to those little companies? Like they look pretty small. Like some of them don't even look like they have any customers. Do you actually lose deals? And they'll say, well, no, we don't. And I'll say, so who do you actually compete with? Like if customers didn't use you, what would they do? And they'll say things like, oh, they probably just use a spreadsheet. Or better yet, they'll use an intern. Like you're never going to beat the intern on ease of use. Just never. Like the intern's super easy to use. Like, Joey, get me a coffee while you're at it. Fill out the spreadsheet. Easy, right? So here you are walking around positioning around a competitor that isn't actually the real competitor. Once you get that, then you can say, okay, now I know who I compete with. This is what I've got that's unique and different from them. These are my differentiated features. Then I can say, how do those features translate to value? This is the value I can deliver for customers. Then I can say, well, what customers care a lot about that value? Those are my best fit customers. And then lastly, I've got market category. I'm trying to communicate this value to these people. What's the best context to put that in to do that? So anyways, this is a big topic. I could talk about this for hours. I got other things to teach you today. If you want to go way down the rat hole on positioning, I wrote a whole book on it for like the cost of a beer. You can go learn everything that there is to know about positioning that I know at any rate. So that's the first bit. First, I got to make sure I'm fighting a fight I can win by doing deliberate strategic positioning. All right. How else do I beat the hordes? But this one is a little bit of a positioning thing too. What I do here is I teach my prospects how to buy. This is an interesting one that I don't think we think enough about, particularly in tech. Think about your product right now and think about who you sell to. Have your buyers ever purchased a thing like that before? I spent years in the CRM space, and everybody that was buying a CRM literally had never bought a CRM before. They'd never bought one before. So how the heck do they know how to evaluate CRMs? How do they know what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to? How do they make a short list of companies to look at? Well, they Google around like, oh, gee, let's have a look here. Let's say I'm a buyer and I'm thinking about buying something to help my sales team do training, sales enablement software. I'll look at this. Is this helpful? No, this is the opposite of helpful. Now I have 7,000 things to look for. Good. I'm never going to look at all those things. But eventually I figure out, oh, there's a box in there. If I want sales enablement, that's what this thing is called. Sales enablement. That's what I want. Oh, well, this is still bad. So, now I don't have 7,000, but I still have way too many to evaluate. I can't look at all of these. And then let's say eventually I land on one of these like comparison sites like G2 Crowd or Software Advice. Does this help me narrow it down? Well, not really, right? Look at the axes on these things. One of them is market presence. Like, let's say I'm a little wee startup. I'm like, I look at those things at the top right, and I'm like, those look like for big companies. I'm not a big company. I don't have that budget. So just because you're top right doesn't mean you're good for me. And here's the dirty secret about all these comparison sites. They make money off customer confusion. Think about it. How do these guys make money? They make money from you clicking around on a whole bunch of different grids going, oh my, I don't know what to pay attention to here. That's why they have this proliferation of grids that don't even make sense. That's why they got your product in all kinds of grids that you wish your product wasn't even in, because the more these people click around and fill out forms, the more money they make because they sell those leads to people. This was not designed to actually help customers buy. So how do customers buy? Well, how should they figure this out? Who knows a lot about how the market is split apart, or who could actually teach people a sensible way to split the market or think about the market? You, vendors. We're awesome at this. We spend all day thinking about this. We have, each of us, a very strong point of view about what makes a good or not a good solution in here. Now, we don't want to share it with customers generally, because we're like, well, why would a customer want to hear my point of view on this? Because I'm biased. Of course you're biased. Customer knows you're biased, but they're still interested in this. If you can figure out a way to share your point of view on a market in at least an honest way, then even though it's biased, it's still helpful. Let me give you an example. So I work with this company. They're in the sales enablement space, right? So they're one of these people on here, and they're like, this is a tragic mess. And half these things, we don't even consider half these things sales enablement. So instead, what these guys did is they created a bunch of content. So one of the things they built was Sales Tech Explained using donuts. And they put this thing out on social. It got a lot of traction. And so it was like, okay, here's how we split the market. There's a thing called sales intelligence. That's like saying, I know who likes the donuts. And here's 3 examples of software companies in that space. Or there's sales engagement platforms. That's, I manage how often I call, email, or email people about the donuts. And here's the people in there. And then if you look way down, there's something called sales readiness / enablement. What's that? And that's, I train people to become the master at selling donuts. And here's 3 companies you should look at. Yeah, one of them's me, but here's 2 other ones that happen to be, big competitive folks in that space. Having the guts to do that gets you on a lot of short lists, because that's all people are trying to figure out. How do I get on a short list? They started getting a lot of questions about, well, wait, I understand that donut thing, but how do I know how everything interacts with everything else? So then they built another graphic, and it was kind of like it was like the shopping mall and everywhere the map of the shopping mall. So you have the foundational stuff, which is sales engagement. And so everybody's got this sales engagement, conversational intelligence. Then what you've got layered on top of that is like corporate learning. So, inside your corporation, you've got corporate learning platforms. That is actually really different from sales enablement. Sales enablement is a thing that sits on top of corporate learning. And you can do that with content management systems or sales readiness. So if what you want is the sales readiness stuff, here's us, and here's a couple other people you could look at too. Super helpful for customers. So that's it. This is how you stand out amongst the hordes. Deliberate positioning, and don't be afraid to just position everybody else and not just yourself. 2, the giant. So how am I going to beat the giant? Here's kind of the dirty secret about this. And again, like little companies often don't think about this. You can position your competitors just like you position yourself, even the big ones. And so one way to do that is to kind of take their strengths and use it against them. So inside every strength of a big competitor is a weakness. So I used to work at IBM. And one of the things we used to talk about all the time was how proven our solutions were. We're like, they're so proven. They've been around for ages. This is mature software. All the kinks are worked out of it. Lots and lots of people using it. And little startups would come in and win deals against us. They just position us as legacy. Oh, that used to make us so mad. We're like, there's the old stuff. When you say your product is market leading, that's another way of saying it's unspecialized. It's the generic thing. It's the thing for everybody. It leads the market, right? Not for these people, not for these people, not for these people. If you're in a niche, you can position the big guy that way. At IBM, we used to pride ourselves on, we have a drop-down menu with 9 million things on it. And we would talk about how feature-rich our stuff was. But then we would have little guys come in and say, you know what that is? It's complex. There's a lot of stuff there you don't actually need for certain kind of customers. And trusted by many is sort of the same thing as saying it's slow to innovate. You can't change too much. You got all this big existing install base. Here's an example of 2 companies and how they're positioning against each other. So D2L, formerly Desire to Learn, they're in the ed tech space, pretty big company, lots of features, broad product, does everything that an educational institution would need, big depth, breadth. It's amazing. This little startup pops on the scene called Canvas, and they got a lot of investment money, but the product itself is fairly immature, so it doesn't do a lot. And their whole thing was ease of use, man. Like we're like sleek little Volkswagen Beetle. And they'd come in and they had these slides where they're like, here's us. We're like just the stuff you need. And it's cool and it's modern and it's sleek. And those D2L guys, man, they're like your grandpa's station wagon with a bunch of crap hanging off of it. And they literally put up this slide that was like, they got all kinds of stuff, but do you really want all that stuff? And it was a bit of a punch in the gut, I think, to the bigger company, but smart positioning on the part of the little guy to do that. Here's the other way you beat the giant. And again, we're scared to do this sometimes, but the other way you beat the giant is you actually let them win in some places, but you don't let them win in your patch. So you got a spot that's very well defined where you're like, anybody that sits in this patch, we should win those deals. And if it's not in this patch, we're going to let the big guy have it. So an example of this, I worked at this company and we were CRM for investment banking. So we were a niche thing inside a bigger market. And this was ages ago, and Salesforce was still only playing in the small end of the market. We were playing big enterprise deals. The leader in that market at the time was this company, Siebel, who was way better than us, like 2 billion revenue, lots and lots of customers, and big company, 8,000 people or something. And we were like 30 people, but we positioned ourselves as CRM for investment banks. So the neat thing about that is it gave us the ability to position them. So when we went in and met with investment banks, we'd say, we're CRM for investment banks. Investment banks would be all squinty eyed at us like, wait, don't you guys compete with Siebel? And we're like, Siebel, what a company. We love them. They're amazing. Oh, we love them. They're so great, so big, so many customers. They're like, you know what they are? They're like the world's most amazing general purpose CRM for like call centers in India and I don't know, manufacturing plants or something. They're amazing if what you want is general purpose CRM, not you, Wolf of Wall Street. You need something special. And then we had this bunch of special features. And we'd show them, like, here's all our special stuff. We'd cut them right out of the deal right at the beginning. No investment banker wants to look like a call center, right? So we would position them in a way where we basically gave them the rest of the market. But in exchange for, they're never going to beat us on our patch. Last one, the ghost. The ghost is, in some ways, it's like the worst, right? Because you did all this effort to get on the short list, all this effort to beat the big guy or whatever and get chosen. You're all the way down to the end of this deal, and then the customer's like, no decision. So I used to work in enterprise software, and like I'm telling you, the research on this shows that typically in enterprise software, 20% of deals are lost to no decision. That means you went all the way through the whole thing, and then right at the end, the customer said, we're just going to stick with what we got. I actually think that 20% number is low. Like at the companies I worked at, it was closer to 30. We lost to no decision. The data on this is amazing, right? Like the stuff on the left of this chart here is from a study that gets done every year where they go and talk to successful enterprise sales reps, and they talk to them about what do your customers struggle with in the buying process. And the top three things come out like this. Number one is building a case for change. How do we actually get the company convinced that they got to do something different? The second one is comparing their options. That's all the stuff we've been talking about in the rest of this presentation, right? They don't even know how to put on the short list. And oh my God, like what if we make the wrong choice here? So we need a good solid way to think about the market so that we know we're making the right choice. And then the last one is combating the status quo. That's the same thing as number one, right? So all of this is like customers don't know how to buy. And then even when they get all the way down to the end, they have this big trouble switching from what they've got right now. So how do we fix that? And there's a bunch of ways to do it, but the best way to do it, in my opinion, is you make sure that your positioning aligns with whatever your key priorities are in your target accounts. Now, this is particularly important to understand right now when, we're in the middle of a market that's kind of unsettled, and a lot of businesses have been impacted by that. And a lot of companies are taking a good hard look at their priorities. A lot of them have shifted their priorities because of COVID. So here's an example of a company that, in my opinion, did a really masterful job of this. And I'm super biased because I happen to sit on the board of this company, but it's a great example. So these folks are samplers. What they do is they have a digital product sampling solution. So if you think about big consumer packaged goods brands, they spend a fortune, like billions and billions of dollars, on sampling campaigns. So you're launching a new granola bar or cereal or snack or something, and you'll see these people standing on the street corner handing out samples, or they're in the grocery store handing out samples, or they're in the drugstore handing out samples. Companies spend billions on that, and it is a key part of their product launch strategy. The way it's done today is super inefficient. They have no idea who took the sample. They don't know it really. They can't trace if sales went up because of it and what kind of people like the sample. Sampler does this in a digital way. They match people to samples. They deliver the sample to their home, and then the brands can follow up with them and survey them and figure out their demographics and find out, did they like it or not? Did they go buy things? So that's what Sampler does. Everything's going good. Company's growing good. Everything's good. COVID hits. So, and the immediate reaction inside their customer base was sampling's done. It's done. It's over. We can't stand on the street corner and hand these things out. We sure as heck aren't going to be in a hazmat suit in the middle of the grocery store handing out little pieces of chocolate bar. No, it's done. Over. And all of their customers were like, stop. Sampler, however, is the perfect solution to this problem. right? They're delivering a sample to people in their houses. So Sampler did this really quick change, decided to refocus on what they call contactless product sampling, right? So they wrote a lot of think pieces about this. They did a lot of PR. At a moment when the press is going crazy, like how is the world going to change due to COVID? Samplers in there talking about, you know what? You're not going to be trusting out the lipstick at the drugstore anymore, putting your COVID on your lips. No, we're going to have to find a way to do this in a contactless way. And by the way, we have the solution for that. So their initial reaction in their market was a complete stop for a couple of weeks. And then they came out with this big push. And then all of a sudden the brands were like, oh, we can do sampling without having to contact people. We could do contactless product sampling. We're in. Their sales completely skyrocket. And they ended up raising a big round of financing in the early days of a pandemic when nobody was writing a check for anybody. So that's it. Recap. How do you beat the hordes and stand out from anyone else? You position your products deliberately to make sure that you're fighting a fight you can win. Secondly, how do you beat the giant? You can take the giant and position them too, and you can position them in such a way that what looks like a strength is actually a weakness. And then lastly, how do you compete against the status quo? You make sure that your positioning aligns with the key priorities of prospects so they understand, why should I be focused on this right now? Here's my contact info. You can send me an email at april@aprildunford.com, and I'm on Twitter at @aprildunford. And now we have some time for questions. So let's do that. Do you think I should turn off the slides so you can just see me? I have no idea what this looks like for you, but maybe you don't see me much. Let's see. What have we got?
Yes. Hey, April, you might want to turn off your slide because you're
you're
a little blip.
I'm a little blip. I don't want
to. You're a little blip on your slide. So
I don't like that positioning at all. I am not blip.
I think they want to see you. So
all right, here we are.
You have a bunch of questions.
Yeah. So Jonathan asks, is there a proactive way of fighting the ghost so you don't get blindsided by it at the end? Like this idea of aligning to your customers' priorities is where your ability to be constantly taking the temperature of your customer base so that you know what their priorities are is really, really important. Like this is the reason why I'm such a big fan of customer advisory boards. Like if you're meeting regularly with a customer advisory board and talking to them about what are your key priorities this year, where, at a corporate level, where are you spending money? Then you have like an early warning system when these things start to change and shift. And so like in the case of Sampler, they didn't have a product advisory board, but they were doing a lot of stuff direct one-on-one with customers. And so they knew exactly what was going on when COVID first hit and were able to react quickly to that. So, but the big thing is you need to understand what the priorities are. And if they're starting to shift, you need to be able to shift with them. We got another question. How would you propose to change? Oh, it just keeps moving around. Wait, I'm gonna answer that live. Does that make it go away? No, it doesn't. So how I had one and then it disappeared. How does positioning evolve as your category matures over time? So this is a good one. Positioning is not a static thing. It changes for a lot of reasons. Like it changes because your product itself is maturing, like you're adding and removing features all the time. It changes because the competitive landscape changes. So new competitors are coming in and out of your space. You may need to react to that. Sometimes it changes because technology, like what is possible changes. And maybe you had something that was really differentiated and now it's not differentiated anymore. And then you have outside forces, like, it changes because the customer's priorities have changed. So the thing that you have to be doing is you have to be checking in on your positioning regularly. And like in my positioning methodology, you're looking at things like competitive alternatives. So do we have a different competitive alternative that's coming online? Are our differentiated features still really differentiated? And is our value proposition still aligned with what the key priorities are with our customers. In the companies where I worked in, like back when I was VP marketing, we used to check in on this about every 6 months. We get the whole executive team together and be like, has any of this stuff changed? And do we need to adjust the positioning in response to that? How would you propose to change organizational mentality from MVP, minimal viable product, to USP, unique selling proposition, when innovating a product? I don't know. I'm not sure I know how to, like, I will say, here's the thing. Like when we think about an MVP, the MVP has to deliver on some key value, right? So in order for me to have a good value proposition around this thing, I can't just have the story of what the thing is going to do in the future. It's actually got to deliver on at least part of that value right now. Particularly if I'm a startup. Like, I don't even believe you're going to be available in the future. You're going to die before you get to the future. You need to sell me on what you've got right now. So the viable part of minimum viable product means it needs to actually deliver on the promise that you are making the customers, even at its MVP stage. So I think as long as you're thinking like that, it's like, we need to win deals right now in order to survive long enough to get this product to the next version. So every version of it you need to be able to sell it to somebody in the state that it's in at every stage. So that's kind of my answer to that. How can a mid-level product manager help convince the executive team they need to change the same positioning they've had since being founded? Oh, Jeff, I feel your pain. This is basically the story of my entire career. In my opinion, the product people, one of the biggest strategic contributions you can make to the organization is, if you see that the positioning is weak, is convincing the executive team to look at it. And that's it. Just look at it. And that's usually the big stumbling block. The stumbling block is nobody wants to change it because they don't see a problem. So you're going to have to demonstrate how maybe there's a problem. I'm not saying we got to change it. Maybe there's a problem. And maybe we should look at it. Now, how I used to do this is I used to hang around a lot with sales. So you hang around a lot with sales and you start seeing the evidence of weak positioning, right? And the evidence of weak positioning looks like this, like, hey, we get compared a lot to competitors that we don't actually compete with. Hey, people don't think we can deliver on the value we say we can deliver on. Hey, people, like, we say this is our unique value, but we lose deals because we have competitors that say the exact same thing. If I can convince sales that there's potentially weak positioning, now I got something I can go to the CEO with and say, I'm not saying it's bad, dude. I'm not saying we're even going to change it. I think what we should do is take a step back and let's do a positioning exercise. Let's actually deliberately do positioning through an exercise. If the positioning's great, that's what we'll get to at the end, right? But if the positioning's weak, it might show us something. This is exactly what I do with companies as a consultant now, is we do these structured positioning exercises. But you can do that internally. I used to do it internally. If you're looking for a structured way to do it, my book gives you ability to do that. But see, you can't change positioning on your own. It actually needs to be owned by the entire executive team. Like, could you imagine my Clearpath Robotics example? Could you imagine the product manager comes in and says, hey, we're not robots anymore, we're self-driving cars? The CEO would tell you to take a hike. So I'm going to have to kick off a process that involves the executive team, head of sales, head of marketing, head of product, head of customer success, and we're all going to work on this thing together, because a shift in positioning is really like a shift in business strategy. But on the product side, you can own being the person that's checking in on the positioning, and that comes to the CEO and says, maybe we got a problem. Maybe we should look at it. I'm not saying we should change it. Maybe we should look at it in a structured way. And, and again, the more you can be aligned with sales on that, the more the CEO is going to listen to you, because it impacts revenue. Blah, blah, blah. Here's one. In the presentation, we see examples of products and company positioning. How do you balance this? When should we promote the whole company and when to concentrate on product features? Oh, I have opinions about this. So I've worked at a lot of startups, and we have one product. And so if we just have one product, then the company positioning is kind of equivalent to the product positioning. But when we have many products, that's different, right? Like IBM is not equivalent to the positioning of one particular product inside IBM. So in my opinion, the best way to handle this is the positioning actually needs to cascade. So this week I was doing a workshop with a company that has two key products. They sell those two key products to the same kinds of buyers, but you might start with this one or you might start with this one. So what they needed was positioning that said, we do this for these kinds of people. And that positioning encompasses the capabilities of all the products. And then the individual products get positioned individually underneath that. At really big companies, you can, like IBM, for example, when I was there, it did a really great job of this. Like, so, I was in charge of a particular product at IBM. That product sat inside a division, which was DB2, and the division was like, I don't know, 5 billion revenue. And that sat inside software group inside IBM, which was 30 billion revenue. And then all of IBM was like 150 billion revenue. So when we went in to pitch our product, we would go in and say, hi, we're from IBM. Here's why you want to buy from IBM. You know why? Because we're hardware, software, services. This might not be the positioning now. This is what it was back then. Hardware, software, services. This is why you want to buy all three of those things from one vendor. Now, you might not actually think of us as a software company, but we do 40 billion in software. Specifically, we're focused on middleware. And here's why it matters that the middleware all plays nicely with each other. And oh yeah, we're in the database group. You might not know this. We invented relational databases. We actually sell more in revenue in databases than any other database vendor, even Oracle. Amazing, isn't it? And oh hey, today we're here to talk about IBM Information Integrator, and let me position that. So the thinking was, if the product on its own was more valuable outside of IBM, why is it in the company? Like, why don't we just sell it off? Like, if telling the whole IBM story doesn't make this more valuable, then it shouldn't be part of our portfolio. We should sell it off and do better as its own company or with somebody else. So the idea was, the entire company positioning should inform the product positioning and add value to the product positioning. The fact that you're part of this company is valuable. So you need to actually have this cascading positioning down. I'm going to take one more question and then that's it. They're going to give me the hook. And I know I didn't get to everybody's questions, but let's see. I'm going to take this one. One of the struggles I've had in my early PM career is to figure out competitors. Would you give advice on certain criteria or practice we should follow to pick the closest competitors? I have opinions about this. So early in my career, I thought, well, you know how I'm going to figure out who the competitors are? I'm just going to survey my customers. I'm going to go out, I'm going to do a survey, and I'm going to say, hey, if we didn't exist, what would you do? And so I did that. I ran this survey, and what I got was garbage. So I got this garbage bunch of data. There was absolutely no patterns in it. It was terrible. And I was like, well, this sucks. And I was all frustrated about it. And I had a meeting with my boss, the CEO of the company. And I was like, yeah, I did this survey about competitors because I'm trying to figure out competitors. And this is what customers told me that competitors were. And he looks at my list and he goes, who said that? And I said, let me look it up. So then I looked it up, and he says, and I said, it's Bank of Montreal. And he goes, ugh, we hate Bank of Montreal. We literally hate Bank of Montreal. I regret the day we closed the deal with Bank of Montreal. We closed them like 19 years ago. We don't even do that product anymore. They don't use the product the way it's intended. They are not a good fit customer. Take them off the list. I don't care who they think our competitors are. Take them off. And I'm like, okay, take them off. And he said, who else did you talk to? So we went down the whole list. And there were a whole bunch of companies on there that he's like, literally, they don't count. Like we sold them. but they're terrible fit clients. They're actually going to churn on us eventually, and we can't wait till they do. And if we're going to do a positioning exercise and competition is the starting point, don't give me these people that I don't care about. I want to know, what do the good fit people think we compete with? Now, this was an eye-opening concept to me, because before that I was like, well, customers are customers. They're all created equal. But when you think about it, what my positioning is trying to do is I'm trying to position in such a way that I'm building a pipeline full of customers that I love them and they love me, good fit people. So what I actually want to do, and so from that day forward, here's how I do it. First step, I do NPS score, and I know NPS is problematic, but you need some kind of score of customer happiness, which it's a blunt instrument, NPS, but I would do NPS and that would give me a big list of customers. Then I go to sales and I'd say, who's good fit here? Now, salesperson thinks good fit is closes really fast, doesn't ask for a discount, easy to close. And they say, oh, these ones. Then I go to customer success. Who's a good fit customer here? Customer success, that these are the ones that aren't complaining too much. Well, maybe they complain, but it's fair complaining. They're not complaining about weird stuff that we didn't even promise we were going to do. Then I get this short list of customers. Then I get them on the phone. And so I consider these people good fit. I get them on the phone and I'd be like, okay, what were you doing before we showed up? That gives me an idea of status quo. And then I'd say, what happened that made you look at something else? It's a buy trigger. Really important if you're in marketing. What's my buy trigger? What happened? Did you outgrow it? Did it crash? Like, what happened that made you think you had to look at something else? And then when you looked at something else, who else did you look at? And why'd you pick us? And that gives me status quo plus my actual competitors in deals, and a whole bunch of information about buy triggers and what the actual features were that caused them to go with us instead of somebody else. I hope that's helpful. I think I'm done. I appreciate you all showing up here. And I don't know if somebody else is going to come in here and close this thing off. Oh, yes. Because otherwise I'm just going to chit chat and send you
the ghost that was listening in. Thank you so much, April. We really appreciate all your time this morning. Everyone, thank you for all your questions. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I know you guys are already getting around the virtual show. We are going to start the next set of sessions. We'll start at 10:15. Then the next set after that, 11:15 and 12:15, and then 1:15. Yeah, 12:15. All the sessions will work the same way. There's Q&A on the right. You can ask the speakers and panelists questions. I'll highlight again, if you go visit the various sponsors in the expo by clicking the expo link, you'll win points. The most points will be for engaging directly with the staff members that are in that booth. Again, top 10 winners get $100 Amazon gift prizes. If there's any other questions or anything, you can always ask us through the general chat. If not, I think that's it. We are going to start again at 10:15. Thank you again for joining us. Again, thank you, April, for a wonderful talk and wonderful presence. I'm going to hit stop broadcast and we will be done. Thank you so much.